Good morning. My name is Andrew FARROW. I'm from a UK consultancy called RightsCon. I'm here today to lead a discussion, a presentation about a project called Rights Data Integration, in which CEPIC is involved. I wish to make it clear at the outset that when I agreed to do this, Sylvie promised me there would be no one in the audience. So I applaud your staying power. This is most impressive. Thank you for being here. She also didn't tell me that there would be television cameras trained on me. But apart from these minor issues, I think we're good to go. So if you're with me, I shall kick off. So, in accordance with all good presentations, we originally called this from R.D.I. to CiF. We then decided to call it from R.D.I. to CiF and beyond. And then we decided to call it Rights, Identifiers and Links, the art of the possible. Hopefully by the time we finish, you will have understood that there is in fact a link between the two titles. Broadly speaking, this is what we intend to cover over the course of the next hour or so. I'm going to give you some background on R.D.I, Rights Data Integration. Then we're going to have a couple of brief presentations from CAPTCHA and CiF, just showing how some of the technology that we hope to develop during the course of this project actually hangs together. Then a short presentation on identifiers and images, the impact that identifiers have on images. And then we'll have a Q&A section at the end. But just because it says Q&A at the end, please don't stop you putting your hand up at some stage and saying, I have not got a clue what you were talking about. Will you please say that again in words half a syllable? So please do interact, because there's nothing worse than standing here and looking at you all nodding and thinking in your heads. So some background to R.D.I. R.D.I is a test case for something called the Rights Reference Model. The Rights Reference Model was an innovative data framework that was generated by the Linked Content Coalition, LCC. By and large, in the course of this presentation, I don't think there are that many acronyms, but R.D.I and LCC are two that you need to get your head around. So LCC started life as an informal consortium of 40+ organisations, representatives of technology companies, standards bodies, the media companies, and it was trying to address the problem of how do you communicate rights? How do you communicate rights in a machine-readable way? You can almost go back to a statement which, almost lost in the midst of time now, which says, faced with the challenges posed by technology to the media industry, some at least of the solutions to those challenges should be in technology. Or put more succinctly, the answer to the machine is the machine. And LCC was devised with the intent of trying to work out how you go about answering that. It was originally an informal consortium. It's now been formalised. All the major media standards bodies are members of it, including both IPTC and PLUS. And one of the original visions behind the LCC was always, you don't want to end up with just a document that you stick on your desk and put your screen on top. You want to actually do something with it to prove that it works. So R.D.I is a proof that the concepts within the LCC data model are practical. That's what R.D.I was envisaged as. It was part funded, it is part funded by the European Commission. Started in October 2013, will run for 27 months, and as a result, what we're presenting to you at the moment is a set of PowerPoints, primarily, the concepts of where we're coming from, what we're trying to achieve. Just a few words about the political background, because this is a political area. LCC was originally conceived as a response to one of the EC's digital agenda. It was one of the 6 big ideas that they commissioned. R.D.I has been personally championed by Robert Madlin, who's Director General of DG Connect. And something that we probably come back to on a number of occasions through the course of the presentation, there is this initiative which those of you who are based in the UK will probably be more aware of, called the UK Copyright Hub. And there are quite distinct similarities between the hub and R.D.I. R.D.I, as I'll go on to say in a moment, is actually a time-limited trial. The UK Copyright Hub is designed to be a permanent institution. But many of the concepts that we're piloting in R.D.I. are actually relevant to what the Hub is looking to achieve. We're closely involved with the Hub development in the UK. We're going to be looking to see whether or not the technology elements that we're developing in R.D.I. can actually be implemented as part of their ongoing development with the Hub. And we'll see where that goes. The last point to make on there is an informal briefing from a senior advisor to David Cameron, who suggested that certainly within the UK's government's approach to possible widening of copyright exceptions will to a certain degree be determined by the outcome of initiatives like the Copyright Hub. This is front and centre of the political agenda, in the UK certainly. The politicians are looking for some way of the media industry expressing how they're going to make it easier for users. This is what the politicians want to see. If we don't make it easier for users using the technology, they'll make it easier for users using legislation. It's that sort of choice that they're looking at the moment. So I'm going to talk briefly about R.D.I. objectives. And the objectives are quite important here because it is a very tightly defined project. To demonstrate that it's possible efficiently to manage intellectual property rights online for any and all types of usage across any and all types of content in any and all media. It's about rights data. That's what it's about. It's not trying to, every time it tries to veer outside that, we put it back in. It's got a very tight, specific focus. And we hope that as a result of this project, we'll allow rights holders to be able to take informed choices. Not to say that this is what has to be done, but simply that there is a background of knowledge on which you can draw to say what might be appropriate for your business. And that could be any of the ones I've listed on the slide. Could be new business opportunities, could be reduced operational costs. I was listening to the Google image presentation the other day. It could be a way of countering unauthorised use by intermediaries. And the two at the bottom, reduced piracy, reduced orphan works, we're touching on in R.D.I, but actually are rather more a subject for another project we have in mind that we're looking to develop. So if anyone's interested in that sort of area, come to us afterwards. And then to help counter the political pressures, which is what I was talking about earlier. One of the things we find when we're doing these presentations is the R.D.I. is not slide is probably as informative as the R.D.I. is slide. So what is R.D.I. not? It is not a commercial service. No content will be delivered in R.D.I. No value will be exchanged. We're not going to put any particular effort into user interface, optimizing performance, or proving any other well-established technologies. We're not there to prove what other people have proved before us. What we're interested in is rights data. That's not to say that some of the technical elements that are developed during the course of R.D.I. won't go on to have a commercial life of their own. And in fact, it's one of the requirements of EC funding competitions that when you spend public money, you have to show that the money is generating a return for the economy. Not for the EC, but for the economy, for the individuals who've invested the rest of the investment. And that's part of the reason why we're talking, for example, to the Copyright Hub, because we can see that that's one of the opportunities by which we can develop individual technical elements can actually have a life after R.D.I. But R.D.I. is a short-term project to prove a particular objective. R.D.I. is not intended to represent a particular business model. Anything you see in the next hour which suggests to you that we're saying something to the contrary, please stop me immediately and it will never see the light of day ever again. We believe in complete freedom of business models, complete freedom of the rights holder to deliver whatever business model they think is appropriate. It's not intended to imply that all rights have to be delivered automatically. It's not even intended to imply that just because you deliver some rights automatically, you have to deliver the rest of them automatically. This is a highly sophisticated market, very nuanced market, and we're very conscious of the sophistication that goes on in it. And it's most definitely not supposed to imply that rights holders in any way will lose the power to take the decisions about what they want to do is best for their business. And this last one, it is not a replacement for existing standards. It's about integrating existing standards, not replacing them. Where there are gaps in the standards, and this is something that we'll come on to later, then the gaps need to be filled. But where there are good standards, that's fine, we work with them. R.D.I is about rights metadata across all media types. This is one of the reasons why you have someone who has never sold a picture or done anything with pictures in his life, and after registering with the CEPIC conference, received a constant stream of emails from people who were desperate to sell me these abilities, none of which I had any interest in whatsoever. I felt quite sorry for them. R.D.I is about rights metadata across all media types. And there are many similarities there, but there are also some differences in focus, so we thought it might be useful just to map out for you how the still images industry compares to some of the other industries in terms of rights. First list is about how they're simpler. They're usually originally created by one party. Music, audio, visual, often collaborative, and have many rights holders. You don't have a difference between work and manifestation. In music, for example, you have the original composition, you have the performance, you might have the broadcast. These are all quite time-differentiated issues, all with their own rights complexities, something that in still images you tend not to have. This is something that was actually touched on in a previous workshop I was at, which was the ability to split images into component parts is relatively limited compared to other areas. You get clips in movies, you get chapters in books. This is far more prevalent in those areas than it tends to be in still images. So those are the simpler areas. Where they're more complex, volume. The volume of content that you're dealing with is significantly greater than you tend to find in the other media areas. The extent to which images are embedded in other media types to create consolidated product is much greater than the other areas. One of the strangest ones also to us is the extent to which images are available on a non-exclusive basis. Most other media types you tend to get an exclusive provider. And that's definitely not the case with still images. So those are the compare and contrast, the background about where we're coming from when we come to look at your business and we look at the way rights are managed in it. So after a great deal of background, we're actually going to talk about the project. Is everybody still with me, or are people nodding off yet? Okay. This gives me the opportunity to put some pretty pictures on the board, which is, well, at least some pretty PowerPoints. This is the R.D.I core model. This is how it tends to get presented. We have a number of different media types. We have images, music, audiovisual, text. And we have a range of organisations in each of those big blocks, which we call sources. And those sources are responsible for providing rights data to us for each of those areas. We don't try and get sophisticated about the supply chain. They could be rights owners in their own right. They could be technology platform providers. They could be aggregators. I don't care. They just have rights data and they're giving it to them. Then we have this thing called the Transformation Hub. A lot of R.D.I is to do with this transformation hub, so I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides' time. So we get this rights data, people are communicating it to the transformation hub in whatever format they want to. We're not imposing a format. If they use plus, they use plus. If they use rights.ml, use rights.ml. If they use XYZ Company Limited proprietary format, they use we get XYZ Company proprietary format. That's what's fed into the hub. The hub, and you will no way be able to see that that little thing there is the Link Content Coalition data model. The hub is built on the LCC data model, which is where this whole thing initiated, and it's the data model which is sufficiently rich so that it can map between the different terms used in all these different proprietary formats or public standard formats and turn them into a single consistent language. Then you get the rights users who are interfacing through a concept we're calling an exchange, which is effectively a user interface doing some set of services. And they're providing queries through that exchange on the transformation hub. Again, the language that these people are communicating in, whatever language they choose. Same mapping process from there to there as from there to there. A word of caution, ultimately it's more sophisticated than this, but this is the core model. Many-to-many mapping through a hub. And it's going to demonstrate different ways for users to find. Hello? Different ways for users to find and query rights holders. One, which has been slightly disconcerting, so cutting out every now and then. One model, which is being created for us by a company called Rights Direct, allows users to Excuse me. Hello? Let's see if that's any better, or is it just me? Allows users to undertake a search from the hub database, known as me, to identify the rights holder.
Too close to the mic.
Too much, too close. Better like that? You can hear all right?
Yeah, it won't cut out.
Okay. Thank you. Users undertake a search from the hub database to identify the rights holder, research available license types, and request a license fee. The second one, which is being tried by an Italian company, Medra, involves embedding DOI URLs in content on a website. And the URLs, actually the DOI, will direct people to a location where rights can be negotiated. And then the third one is CiF, the Chineka image finder, the CEPIC image finder, where you're able to search using I have a real problem with CEPIC and Chineka, just in my head. The transformation hub is being developed by an Italian company called Chineka. The CiF image finder is the CEPIC image finder. My brain scrambles the two names on a regular basis.
How is the Italian company called, excuse me?
Chineka, C-I-N-E-C-A.
C-I-N-E-C-A. Okay.
It appears in the slide later on, but... and we're going to see a demonstration of CiF later. Talked about the hub, the Chineka hub, which is presented as a single thing, but it actually is a combination of three different elements it's performing. One is it does this transformation. It takes the data coming in from an exchange or from a source, it turns it into the common format using the LCC data model. But it also acts as a registry. So sources who are particularly sophisticated can register with the Chineka hub. advising them what content they have available, so that when a query comes through, the query can be routed by the transformation hub to the appropriate source. And it also acts as a source registry. Some of the sources that we're dealing with are not particularly sophisticated. They don't particularly want to engage in significant development for this project. So what they're doing is literally providing us with spreadsheets. And the spreadsheets are ingested into a proxy registry repository, which is run for them by Tunisia. And then we come to the queries that we're looking at. The first, and arguably one of the least important ones for R.D.I, is to discover content. It's in there of necessity, for no other reason. After that, we come to discover licensor, which is one of the key ones for us. The ability to find who the rights holders are, and where do you go to find them. Discover the terms. Discover the terms under which a license may be granted, whether that's a one-off license or whether it's a blanket license. Request or grant a license. A particular use of content from a licensor, and if appropriate, to receive a license. Discover the status, whether the particular use of a creation is actually authorised by the terms of the existing license or policy. And discover usable content. That's creations which are available for use under the terms of the existing license. These are the sorts of queries that we're looking to put in place. Again, much more detail, as I'm certain you can imagine, but that's the sort of families of queries that we're looking to actually initiate. The whole thing, if you imagine the transformation hub sitting there, allowing these queries to flow with the minimum interruption between the various sources and the exchanges interfacing with them. There are two data flow scenarios for images that we're looking at the moment. There may be more as the project develops. Again, I stress we're less than halfway through at the moment, so what you see at the moment is our thinking as we stand. One of them looks very much like the core model. It's got queries coming in here from rights users, through an R.D.I exchange developed by Rights Direct, into the transformation hub, and querying British Library content held on the capture system. And in a minute, I'll ask Abby and Jeff, certainly Abby, to present why they've gone down the route of plus in terms of the way that they've structured the capture system. So that's one data flow. Second data flow looks rather more like this. You've got the queries coming in from the user through Rights Direct to the transformation hub, but on this occasion, the query is in the form of an image. I have this image, I want to identify who the rights holder is. The image is switched to CiF. CiF goes out in a federated search and returns an answer about where the rights holder exists. Now, in this model, all subsequent negotiations take place directly with the rights user. Now, before we go any further, all of that's up there could be variable. The rights user might go direct to CiF. The rights user can go directly to capture. There's nothing stopping them working the way that they would do normally. But what we're trying to do is to show how it's possible to give the user a single view, perhaps in a complicated multimedia query where they've got images, music, text, and they're looking to see as easily as possible where the rights exist. This is one way that we could go about doing it. That brings me to the end of the first part of this presentation about the background to R.D.I. We're going to move on to a couple of presentations, firstly about Plus and then about CiF. Are there any questions at this stage about any of the slides that I've put up? In which case, I'd like to introduce Avienne from Capture.
Morning everybody, my name's Abby Enoch and I'm CEO of Capture Limited, and we've been building digital asset management systems and e-commerce and business systems for our industry, I think for about 15 years or so now. So my relationship with Plus goes back actually probably to since I think about 2006 or 2007, when I was really interested to see the very joined up thinking that was going on there. And always with an eye to the future and with a philosophy that we have at Capture, which is to obviously give our clients what they know they want, but also to have an eye on the future and be putting in place building blocks that will help them make the very most of what they have going forward. So back in those days, in 2007, people in our industry were wrestling with a whole bunch of different issues at that point. We'd already for many years been building e-commerce systems, but people always struggled over the matrix and the licensing terms and never had a proper list. And sometimes it held them up for a long time from actually putting together an e-commerce solution. So I was so interested to see the huge body of work that Plus had done in assembling every possible licensing term under the planet and putting it together in an enormously comprehensive body of work. So we took that and kind of harnessed it, if you like, and made it accessible to our users so that they could hone down and focus on the usages that they actually wanted to track. And for me, I could see a world coming where frictionless licensing and machine-readable licenses would obviously be very important. So this was an interesting building block to put in place. And I'm just going to step you through, if you like, a licensing workflow that you'll all be reasonably familiar with, and just sort of talk about the various things that crop up along the way. So if you can imagine, an image has been found in a capture system. You could have come directly here, you might have come through a rights interchange, a variety of ways. So the usual, done a search, image is located, and the user then puts it in the basket. Equally, this is a screenshot from the British Library site. It's exactly the same, slightly different design, but exactly the same idea. So here it is, it's in the basket, and the user then can select a license. They could have selected it actually previously, but for this demonstration we'll do it in this way. And so we have a licensing panel. And I think it's important to stress that this licensing panel, with the various drop-downs, and obviously you can have it very simple or very complicated, and the matrix and the licensing model behind it can work for any kind of license. It doesn't matter whether this happens to be a rights management model. Obviously, we've made up the pricing for this instance, but it could reflect rights managed. It could reflect royalty free. It could be microstock. It could be free, there's no limit to what can be represented by having a standards like Plus in the background. So that seemed very important. Here we've got sort of quite a simple example, a couple of clicks. I mean, I always advise my software clients to keep it really simple, and we'll shortly be bringing out an entirely new licensing journey. It will still be underpinned by Plus, but it will be, the barrier to sale and licensing needs to become lower and lower, so it's really very, very easy for people to actually license content. And of course, it doesn't have to look anything like that. This is an example from another National Portrait Gallery where they've taken a different approach. It can look how you want. It's just that underpinning it all in the background, the right pieces of information are being recorded, and therefore, once you're doing that on an ongoing basis, there's all kinds of things you can do with that in the future. which is really the point. So quite often my clients don't know they need Plus, and actually they might not even know they've got it, but they have actually in the background. It's always there chugging away and recording the license. Yes, so I should have pointed out here along the bottom, when anything is selected, you can see the Plus code is recorded, and that code actually represents everything in those licensing terms. And every aspect of region and industry might be part of that license, or it may be a royalty-free, where actually there's still a license attached to it. It may be that it's world rights in any kind of use, but it's still something that can be recorded. So this is just a detail of what's been recorded in an image. And then user process, people can then download it and confirm and pay. And then the invoice automatically gets created. I just wanted to show that, sort of squaring the circle here, that once the invoice is created, we now end up in the back office of Capture, where in real time that invoice appears automatically, and with it comes all the, we've got the Plus code has come with it, and all the licensing terms are then reflected in the license. So all this has been happening for some years, and I guess the point is that at the moment the best we can do, and as the image is downloaded, it's also pumped into the image. So the code goes into the image, the accompanying license details, like whatever our clients wish to record, they're all pumped into the image at that point, and then travel with the image. And obviously there's a decoder then that can read licenses, and it starts to square this circle of rights and management and tracking rights and matching clashes. And the other thing to say, I guess, is that on the other side of this, with the photographer rights, because when content is submitted to a system, the contributors quite often have rights attached to that. It's not allowed to be sold in a certain country, or maybe not in a certain industry. And we would still use the Plus standards as that list of rights. So then you can start to prevent clashes in licensing by being able to match apples with apples, so the whole circle starts to kind of make sense. So this is an example of an agency running Plus, but many of our customers are also the people that you sell to. So many publishers, for instance, run Capture, and they appreciate that they can think of their licensing terms in a standardised way, that they have a common experience and a common set of choices. And even if they don't realise it in the background, that whenever they license something, it's actually still being recorded. And going forward, when registries start to become a reality in the industry, embedding everything in the image won't be the best thing to do. It's the best thing we can do at the moment, but then going forward, embedding an identifier in the image that then resolves back to a database that then can be updated automatically. That's where eventually this will go. But we have to be realistic, and at the moment this is where we are, and the very safest and best option that I can give to customers is to put all that information in the image and make sure that technology is in place that as registries come into existence, we then can easily, we're already building what we need to make sure that that's a seamless integration, and then we can then easily step onto the next process of really managing the flow of data and the flow of rights in a frictionless and very safe way for everyone. So I think that probably sums up what I was going to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. Sergi. While Sergi is hooking himself up, as he's got to transfer across between the laptops, and we'll have a short presentation on CiF, The thing that we like about the Plus licensing standards is that they can cope with the sort of complexities that some of Avi's customers want, but they can also be dumbed down, if Jeff will forgive me for using the word dumb. They can be simplified to cope with much simpler requirements as well. So they can cope with the whole range of licensing requirements out there. And when you're working to a standard, as Avi is showing, what it allows you to do is to build with some degree of confidence that what you're building actually will meet customers' requirements, even if you're not entirely certain what those requirements are going to be when you start building. So we wait for the technology. That looks hopeful.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Sergi, GRIñO, and I'll show you how the CEPIC image finder works and how it links to the R.D.I project as well. Okay, first of all, I want to explain the CiF goals, or maybe Alfonso, as president of CEPIC, will explain the goals.
Hi everybody, sorry for my cracked voice, but today self-constantly speaking makes my life. No, I have my own set, okay, in my pocket, okay, but I think you reach a point that is not enough. The CiF is a project that goes beyond the R.D.I. I mean, in fact, in 2011, CEPIC was thinking that in order to unite the industry around a single platform, it will be beneficial for our industry to have a database that will be able to trace back who is the owner of a particular image. So when R.D.I came to us asking for the images part of the R.D.I project, we actually merged two things together. We are very keen on developing helping to develop the R.D.I, and we are also keen to develop something for the CEPIC. So what we have in mind is that the CEPIC, the CiF will enforce CEPIC with a technological platform that could be the gravity center of 1,000 members, 1,000 agencies that are under the CEPIC umbrella, to become an image identification entity, generating CEPIC unique image numbers. While our industry has been working for years without actually caring too much and identifying images with one single number, Godfrey RUST will say soon is that the only industry that is in the world today that is not has been standardized is the images industry. And my company, AG Photostock, gets an aggregation platforms, suffers this problem, okay? Because we receive images from 450 different sources, each one with a different number. So that is a business problem that we have to match and map and resolve. So it would be great if the industry will adopt one single standard for this. And this is what we describe as the GUIN, as Sergi will explain later on. You know, to provide a diligent search tool to the industry, and while diligent search is a national level, you know, it has to be something that accumulates masses of images in order to help national diligent searches. Above all, you know, we were in 2011 thinking that sooner or later the UE, in view of all the collective societies, copyright directives, etc., will promote something, okay? And luckily, R.D.I came to match our dream, okay? That sooner or later, UE will decide that the image industry has to be organized in a certain way. So it's great that the CiF can link to emerging projects, R.D.I, maybe FARROW plus, because FARROW will need a visual image search of images, because it's basically a text search for the moment, to collective societies, because collective societies deals with authors, but the CEPIC deals with images. And collective societies, they have author names, but we have the images and the author names. So sooner or later, if they want to play a role, in the images industry, they will need to organize and modernize their thinking. And then becoming a tool for authors and right holders, certifying that the metadata and the images belongs to some particular author. And why I say the metadata, certifying the metadata, because the metadata can be stripped out, okay? We can be removed. We know that Google does that very often. It has to be one center place, okay, that could certify, and could have been better, that a European organization owned by national associations that could certify in front of, in front of tribunals and court cases, etc., that one image belongs to an author and the database was there originally. And then reinforcing the civic presence at the UE level. I mean, at UE there is a lot of political things going on, but we have to show that CEPIC is not only a political institution, it's also at the same time a technological organization that develops things that helps the images industry.
Thank you, Alfonso. I'll try now to explain how the CEPIC Image Finder works internally. Please feel free to stop me or raise any question if you have. Okay, the CEPIC Image Finder links to several sources of images, okay? But the CEPIC Image Finder itself does not hold any image database. Each source holds an image database, has a text search engine, has a reverse image search engine. By a reverse image search engine, we understand an engine that is able to search by the image itself, not by text. Okay? And of course responds to the CEPIC communication protocol, which is governing the exchange of information between the CEPIC Image Finder website and the sources. The CEPIC Image Finder functionalities are to assign a CEPIC unique image number, with what we call the QIN. I'll come back to this QIN and explain in deep detail how it works. To be able to search for images by image, reverse image search, by the QIN or by text if agreed. Identifying the author or the copyright holder of the image, and conforming the rights reference model, which is the model of the R.D.I project, the hub of the R.D.I project. How does it work? With an image search from an image file or from a URL, the user sends the search to the CEPIC Image Finder. The search is federated to every single source, which works their own engines and return the results to the CEPIC Image Finder. Okay, from a text search, it works exactly the same. The user searched the CEPIC Image Finder website. It's by text, of course, or by agency or by author, in text in general, and the search is sent to the sources, and the sources responds to the CEPIC Image Finder. Again, no data is living in the CEPIC Image Finder website. All data lives in the sources, in different sources. Okay? How many sources may we handle? As many as necessary. The system is designed for no limitation on sources. Okay, how agencies, photographers, or whoever can get their images registered into the CEPIC Image Finder? There's two ways at present. One way is by joining an existing source. Okay, they just have to put the images into a source, and that source will be registering the images in the CEPIC Image Finder. And the other way is by creating a new source. Okay, what's needed to create a new source? It's needed an image database, for sure, text search engine, and a reverse image search engine. And, of course, conforming the CEPIC communication protocol to exchange information. Let me speak about the CEPIC unique image number. Okay, it permits identifying the same image from different sources. This is very important to understand that CEPIC generates CEPIC unique image numbers but doesn't store any image. In analogy with the ISBN, which generates international standard book numbers without storing any books. Okay? Images are stored in the sources. The QIN is a 19-digit numeric code with the prefix QIN, and I'll show you how it's composed. Okay, the CEPIC image finder assigns a unique 5-digit code to each of the connected sources, 2 at present. Each source assigns a unique numeric code to each of its images. Okay, the CEPIC image finder generates the QIN by joining the 2 namespaces. The source namespace, which is the first digits, and the 14 digits corresponding to the image code provided by the source. Okay, why it's unique? Let's go directly to the worst of the cases. We have in source 1 that assigns to that image a code. The CEPIC image finder assigns the QIN by merging the namespace of the source plus the image code. In the worst of the cases, source 2 assigns the same code to a different image. When it's registered to the CEPIC image finder, the namespace of the source is added. So as they are different namespaces for different sources, the QIN is different. This guarantees the uniqueness of assigned QINs. Let's see an example more detailed. Okay, there's one photo which is in agency A, who represents a photographer called Stephen Rusfeld. The name, I invented it, so it's not real. Please note that there is a code in the agency A image code. Okay. Now, agency B represents agency A, which happens all the time in our market. Okay, agency B gives their own coding to that image, but we are speaking about the same image. Okay. And agency C represents agency A. Again, agency C is giving a different code for the same unique image. Okay, all 3 agencies feed source 1 with this image. Source 1 assigns the same image code to the image, as it's just one image represented by 3 different agencies, but it's one image from the same photographer. And the CEPIC image finder assigns the corresponding QIN by joining the namespace of the source. How it looks like in the CEPIC image finder is that you have only one image with one QIN, but showing 3 different sources, each one with their own different codes and metadata associated, and with their different licensing areas, for example, which is conforming the LCC R.D.I project requirements. And of course, a link to each source, to each agency. So you cannot get the rights directly from the CEPIC image finder. It only leads you to the copyright holder of the rights, and then you clear the rights with each agency. Let's see how it works live. I'll try to be not very long on that, so I'll give you some examples. Yeah, okay. Okay. Let me show you, for example, this. I want to search for that image. The idea is that we want to know who is the copyright holder of that image. Well, how it works is that you just drag and drop the image there. It searches and comes back from the different sources results that, well, that image has been found in different places, that one here, okay? And it leads directly to the source. If you click, you just go to the source and get the image, okay? Let's see some other examples. Sorry, but it's not easy to work with the two screens at the same time. Thank you, Alfonso. Okay, if we try some other examples, for example, that one, we are searching for that image. Well, it was rotated, the color was deleted, but it belongs to that image. So the way that we can find easily the image now, if we search for that one, for example, okay, we found different images, and if we click on here, we see clearly what I explained before. There's two providing agencies to the same image, but it's just one single queuing. Okay? Well, I can keep on trying on that. The system is very robust because the reverse image search on behind, which are Pixcode and album ones, are very robust, and then you can search the image themselves, even if it's a crop of the image. So this is, and of course, all the results are then transferred to the R.D.I project. So is there any question you want to arise, or?
Well, quite a pressing question. So CEPIC wants to do that to help its member agencies, but in some way this can as well threaten the business model of some member agencies. Because,
sorry, can you tell me who you are, please?
sorry.
Okay, I know.
Excuse me, sorry. I'm Lucia from Upper Pictures in Vienna. So my question is that some picture agencies, their business model is to provide a searchable platform for its clients and to provide professional picture research. So if this is all done by a huge platform, why would a client need my platform? This is one question. And the other one is, for example, a national photographer. If via this platform he can reach hundreds of thousands of clients all over the world, why would he then need to turn to an agency as an intermediate? You know what I mean?
Perfectly, thank you. Well, first of all, the CIFIC image finder will have to have a government team, which they will establish the ability for the clients or not to get in, and how they can search or not. And the other thing is that, yes, it's true that a client might go to the CIFIC image finder and search instead to your own website. But this happens all the time. The client can go to the Google images and search, and they get all the information as well. And there is a platform called Google where all the data is as well. The idea is that the CIFIC image finder is not a tool for selling. It's a tool for addressing the user to the copyright holder. So even if the copyright holder finds an image, then they have to see it in the source agency.
But will it not make agencies who are already competing to compete even more?
I think I understand your concern, because this is a concern of many of the CIFIC members, okay? The other thing is that this tool is to find who is that right author. Just imagine that tomorrow a publisher in Australia has published images, okay? They want to do a re-edition. We have to republish them. And teams change. They don't know where the images were found, and they want to relicense those images. How they are going to find? Going to your platform that you might not have been the person that has sold the image initially, but you can go to a central hub where they can find who has that image, okay, and negotiate a relicense of that particular image. So we are not trying to substitute the agents, we are trying to complement what you are actually doing. Okay?
I was just going to add something endorsing what Sergi was saying, actually, from the outside. And I hope Sergi won't mind if I say this, that he probably doesn't have the biggest development team in the world. And yet he can do this. So the question to you is, if he can do this, anybody can do it. As he says, Google can. So your option is to control it, which is the option that I understand CEPIC are putting before you. Or to let technology companies take it for you, and to control it for you. And it's going to be a message that's come through in the next part of the presentation when we get to it about standardization. The thing about standards is that you can either choose as an industry to implement your own standards and control those standards, or you can let the technology companies provide you with the standards, because that is what they will do. That's how they operate. It's entirely your choice. Sorry, yes, Mike.
I'd like to answer the lady's question. Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear your name.
Lucy.
Yeah.
Lucy?
Yeah.
Lucy. Do I need to?
It's on.
Just okay. My name is Vanita Bullen, and I'm the chairman of the PRA. The PRA is this mic is dodgy. The PR.
Hold it farther away.
The P.
No, it's not working. That's you can
It's
hold
not
it.
working
Yeah.
properly.
Why don't you bring another mic from the front? Exactly.
I do this.
Yeah. It's not so schwer. Thank you, Alfonso.
Thank you. That's a pleasure. Yes, the chairman of the PRA. The PRA is a professional association that represents picture professionals. So I'm one of the unique representatives here, in as much that I buy pictures. I had a demonstration. I'm going to give up. I had a demonstration with. Can everybody hear me if I took? I had a demonstration the other day with Sergi on this unique tool. From my point of view, I think it's a no-brainer. For us, as picture users, it's the most valuable tool if you can get it out there in the marketplace. It's not going to stop us from using your facility to search. What we are confronted with on a daily basis, if you work in a newspaper, if you work in a magazine, or if you work in a book publisher, is somebody out there is using Google Images to find the images, trying to do our jobs. They think they can do our job, but they don't know how to do our job properly. And in effect, Google has kind of like brought upon a situation for us as picture professionals that's enabled inexperienced picture people or editors to search images. So they confront us with this image that they have no idea who it's from. We get this at least 2, maybe 10 times a day. I've had books from publishing companies where the entire visual representations have been searched or have been sourced from Google, and nobody knows who the ownership of them are. So for us to retrace those steps, it takes at least 2, maybe 3 hours of our valuable time to go back and find the source. Something like this, if it gets into operation, it's a no-brainer. You just drop it in, you find it. And the worry, I think, that people feel, okay, you've got maybe 2, maybe 3 other sources that represent that particular photographer or that particular image. Well, what you'll do, you will actually go to the source that you probably have a reproduction fee agreement with, or that you would just literally hit that picture, find the agency and go and negotiate your fee. It will stop, I think, a lot of time that we waste, and it will also bring a sale to you, because it will actually prevent people from going ahead and doing an authorised search, authorised use. Because our theory is, if you can't find it, you go to your editor and you say, I can't find the image. Unscrupulous editors might say, go ahead and use it. I personally, as a picture professional, would never ever advocate that. But it happens in the industry, you know it happens. And I think it will also help you find, I'm not sure, because I don't know too much about the software, but it also find other places where your images are being used, you know, without authorization. So I personally think it's a good tool. And I don't think you should be concerned. Sorry.
Hi, hello, I'm Edith. I represent the German association BVPA, and we have many concerns from our members. So some of them are here. Maybe they want to ask a question. I think that would be very good. Again, I support you totally, and the people that attended the clients panel this week, which was I think yesterday with German strong publications. That's basically what they say. We need more service from our picture agencies because we do not have time, especially from the online clients. And our world is going more and more mobile. Everybody knows that. And just imagine how great it would be to have such an image finder to help your clients to get the license for the images they want to use. It could also be a service. I understand the concerns again from the picture agency, but also it could be as an added service for everybody. That's just what I want to add.
My name is Stefan from the Swiss Association, and I want to say that we think it's very important that a non-commercial organization controls this project. And CEPIC could be the right organization. If you put that in private hands, you will suffer other problems that you don't have if there is no commercial interest behind.
Hello. Hello? No. Well, I am wondering if when you are searching from one country, if you could just have the results about the agencies who distribute this image in the country to avoid the too many sources, or I don't know. Is it in project or not at all?
Of course, this is something that technically can be done, and it's in the hands of the CEPIC to decide. If the technical committee of the CEPIC decides that if a request comes from Germany, only German agencies' results will be shown.
No, I don't say that. Only Germany agencies, if they distribute the image you are searching for.
Yeah, sorry, I mean that. Yeah, I mean that, of course. So it's up to the CEPIC to decide, the technical committee of the CEPIC to decide.
I think the point about the governance of CiF has always been very important. Who controls it? Who is responsible? Who is responsible for it? Exactly what it does. Particularly when you come to look at some of the standards issues that Sergi was talking about in terms of the identifiers. Having an independent body controlling that is important. These are big issues which need to be discussed. No one here today is suggesting that everyone has all the answers, just that we are at least trying to talk about them.
Maybe to finish the CEPIC part, I would like to say that some of us have been traveling Europe showing this thing to national associations. We have had huge support, basically. And the AGM this week, we voted to see, do we want to support the development of this project? It was a majority that everybody is supporting the project, provided that CEPIC will not have any economic involvement until we will be able to find a business plan. We have spoken with Sergi. If she will continue offering his generosity to maintain this project alive, okay? There are other companies that will like also to continue supporting this with no cost to CEPIC. But now I think we are in the moment that CEPIC has to decide that we need a technical committee and a governance committee to organize all this in order that all national associations will be pleased. Some will respond to your query to say that it's a German client, only German agencies will appear. But all these concerns, have to be developed from now on. But before that, we will only showing the project to everybody. But I don't want to monopolize this presentation, which is basically R.D.I. Okay?
As we said, if everyone's okay, we probably should move on to get the totality of the presentation, but there'll be an opportunity to ask more questions at the end, so please don't feel that we're cutting off any debate at this point. So what we'd like to move on to is talk about identifiers for images. I'd like to introduce my colleague from RightsCom, Godfrey RUST, who will talk to you about this.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Abby and Sergi and Alfonso. From an R.D.I. perspective, just to sort of give a footnote to that, the reason why we've been so keen to work with PLUS and with CiF is because the basic question behind R.D.I. is who owns something? Where can I get a license? Or is it owned by anybody? That's the root question that drives it, and it's the same for the UK Copyright Hub. It's from the user's point of view, how do I find out who owns this? Whether it's an image, piece of music, text, audiovisual, whatever. And the reason we were so drawn when we first saw the demo of, when we first talked to CEPIC, and also when we talked with Jeff about his approach, is because they're both initiatives which understand very clearly that's what's needed, and that's why we've been very keen. The reason the CIF is part of the R.D.I. project is because when we met with Sylvie first of all, we saw two things. Firstly, that here was an initiative that could bring the image sector more closely in. The second thing we saw was that, as I think Alfonso's mentioned, the image sector was lacking quite severely in certain data standards, and we wanted to do something, see if we could do something to encourage the development of that. And that's what I want to talk about specifically now. But I wanted to make just one comment about Sergi's presentation. Showing the sources, it shows at the moment there are, I think, 3 different sources. Two different sources from that. And also, importantly, 2 different technologies. It's not tied to a particular kind. It's not tied to PixScout, it's not tied to Album, it's not tied to anything. I think that's really important. And R.D.I. from the outset has made it absolutely clear that we're not having anything to do with something that isn't completely inclusive. That's why we wanted to make sure PLUS was involved, CEPIC was involved. We're very happy Getty's involved. We know they're a big beast in your business, and some people find that a bit intimidating. Well, we have to live with it. We need everybody involved, an inclusive solution that levels the playing field as much as possible. That's the approach we've taken, and Sylvie knows we wouldn't accept anything which wasn't open and inclusive. But it says at the moment 2 sources. We would like to see every source. That's the solution to the problem the lady here raised. Is if when you query CiF, you can get an answer from any library or any registry, then the problem's going to be solved. You'll then have the nice problem that the lady back there raised, is can I filter the results because I've got too many results? And that's a good problem to have, because at the moment the problem is usually I haven't got a clue who to go to, so I start from there. So, as my footnote on that, I wanted to, just to make the point about PLUS, the PLUS data format, the CiF data, IPTC metadata, and RightsML, which is the IPTC rights language, are all formats that we are mapped into R.D.I. So we can take data from anybody using those at the moment. And the principle, as Andrew has already said, is that we can take data from any format at all and integrate it together. My main work in LCC and in this project has been on the data model and on that process. If anybody wants to discuss any aspects of that, we're very happy to do that, but we're not covering any of the detail of that. Most of you will be pleased to know in this presentation. What I want to talk about now is this question of identifiers for images. Because R.D.I. and the Copyright Hub and initiatives like this can integrate data, but if the data's not there in the first place, you can't do anything with it. And that's the biggest single problem, is that there isn't good enough data in a lot of parts of different businesses. Yeah, okay. So let's just this section has looked beyond R.D.I and CiF. The need for an image ID, as I mentioned, is one of the reasons why we were so keen on CiF. And it's not because CiF could provide a complete solution, but because we saw it provided a missing link in what was there. The lack of an image ID, I think, is one of the 3 biggest gaps in the infrastructure needed for a robustly and highly automated rights management network. If you want to know the other 2, ask me afterwards. But I think the lack of an image identifier is critical. Here you can see, oh, where did they go to? It's interesting. Okay. The main content types, these are the standard identifiers and the years in which they were standardized within ISO. And it's a fairly good indication of their maturity. ISBN, those of you who know the book industry will know that ISBN is totally dominant there. Everybody uses it. Similarly with ISSN. ISRC, generally so in sound recordings, and then the more recent ones, ISAN, ISWC, and particularly ISTC, which is very recent, still finding their feet in terms of wide adoption. But they've all got standards, they've all got industries behind them, they've all got a method. The big gap there, images, there is no standard identifier for an image. There's nothing different about your industry in that respect. There's nothing special about photographs, which means they don't need identifiers. And especially in the digital world, all of this is now just digital stuff, and digital things need identifiers. So that we saw as a critical problem at the outset of LCC and R.D.I. And these, I think, are the two sort of reasons people give why we don't have an identifier. Well, either it's too difficult, for some of the reasons Andrew mentioned, there's too many images, it's all too complicated, or we can manage okay without it. I think both those things are wrong. It's not too difficult. I'm often amazed when I look at the phenomenal things that people can do with technology, and in your industry, the amazing things that people do with technology, but you can't work out how to assign identifiers. You know, if a little bit of the effort that went into the creativity of what goes on in the digital world went into actually putting the infrastructure in place, just a little bit more effort, these are not hard problems to solve, just required. They're very boring, we know that. It's not as much fun, but they're very, very necessary. And I hope I'll go on and explain why I don't think it is too difficult for where we are. We manage okay without? Well, yes and no. I hope that I'll go through now and give a few reasons why I think perhaps you're not managing as well as you might do, and it's only going to get worse and worse. I'm not telling you your own industry, and I'm certainly not saying you must have identifiers, otherwise you can't license your content. Of course you can. You can find your content, you can license it, you can do lots of things. But you are a bit crippled in some ways, and it's only going to get worse. And I'd summarize it this way. How do I say something about an image unless I actually embed that information into the image's metadata, or unless I associate it somehow with a thumbnail? How do I just make a statement about your photograph? Linked data, some of you will be aware of, is currently a buzzword used for describing the making available of information generally about anything and everything in a triple data format. But the basis of linked data is you make statements about things using identifiers. You say, Shakespeare wrote Hamlet, and you give an identifier to Shakespeare and you give an identifier to Hamlet. And that way computers can read it and they can link it up with other data. So how do I say that about your photograph if I don't have an identifier? How do I say, my book contains your photograph, or this photograph's a version of your photograph, or I've got this particular right in this photograph for this territory, or I created this photograph, or this photograph is whatever information you want. How do I do any of that separate from the image itself if I don't have an identifier? It's as simple as that problem. And that, however you scale that, you can read your own requirements in there. If I want to say something about your pictures without an identifier, I can't do it. I have to some way tie it back. And that seems to me to be a potentially, in some areas, fatal problem. So without IDs, we can't make reliable, automatable statements about anything. And we're talking now in a world where we want computers to be able to make statements and make connections. Okay? Simple example comparison. In music, which is my own particular background, a recording contains a song. And this particular recording is, I just found on the web, it's a backing track for a cover version of Dancing Queen. Thought you'd like I haven't heard it, I don't think I want to. But it's got an ISRC, because it's a recording, and they all have ISRCs nowadays. And the song is, of course, Dancing Queen. And I chose this because this is a standard that I drafted originally, the International Standard Work Code, and the #1 International Standard Work Code was issued by the Swedes, and it was issued to Dancing Queen because it was their best-selling song. So that's why it's T1. So a little curious, possibly uninteresting piece of standards history for you. So I can say that ISRC contains that. And a service like, say, SoundCloud, which monitors the usage of recordings for a lot of the copyright societies, is able to read the broadcast output of radio stations, fingerprint, using its own fingerprint technology for the audio, recognize that this recording is that ISRC, and it has assembled, because of its relations with other people, the link to the fact that that ISRC contains that. So every time something is broadcast somewhere, services like SANMAS are able to recognize it and make the connections, in this case, to at least 2 and possibly many more sets of rights holders and distributors. Now that's the norm in the business that I came out of, and it was very necessary for them because of the particular nature of it. But you have exactly the same issue. If we take an analogy and we say something simple like, this book contains this photograph, well, the book's got a number, but the photograph hasn't. Now, whatever you want to do with it, how do you get over that problem? So, another key issue is that rights data changes over time. Descriptive data shouldn't. You may want to add to it, you may find it's wrong, but the author's not going to change, the photographer's not going to change. But different rights may be controlled by different parties, and at different times and places, as you know. Rights data is also very vulnerable to being stripped out. So putting rights data into the metadata of an image isn't a very sensible or practical way to go about it. What is needed, as in every industry, is a way in which you can make statements about images just by referring to that ID. And then that ID can be embedded in the image to allow you to get to the rights information. And here's another positive way of looking at it. Systems, once you've got a standard, systems are built on it. Imagine the retail trade without the barcode. And look at what has happened since the barcode came in terms of the way the retail organizes itself. It totally revolves around that. Same with the book industry and the ISBN and the ONIX standards. In my own world of music copyright societies, the party ID, for 40 years now, has been the glue that's enabled you, if you found some song by Paul McCartney in China, you didn't know the song, but you knew that Paul McCartney was represented by the British Society because you had his number. You could track it back there. In images, the IPTC metadata has become the basis of a lot of very basic processing. So once you've got a standard, it changes, becomes a game changer, and all kinds of things can be built on top of it. Okay? And one final point. One of the answers people often say is we can do this with technology. Data outlasts technology. Technology changes. Data is more like the DNA that passes from one generation to another. It passes through different technologies. Identifiers and data don't or shouldn't change. And so you have good data, you can cope with the technology. The problem is also not the lack of identifiers. It's actually that there's too many of them. Because as you will know, every system issues its own ID to any picture, any person or whatever. And so images and parties have multiple IDs which are not joined up. CiF demonstrates that when it finds the same image in 2 places, they'll have different IDs from different sources. So, now there are different ways to create standard IDs. And I'm going to finish this presentation by outlining 2 ideas, straw men, of how we could approach standard IDs for parties and for creations. Now, Sergi and Sylvia are going to be a little surprised at this because I'm not going to mention queuing, and I'm not mentioning it deliberately. I will mention it at the end. But what I've done is I thought I'd stand back and say, from an ISO point of view, what would you need to make this work, and how could we then see how the tools we've got, the plus tools, the CiF tools, do it, okay? So I'm not starting with queuing, I'm starting somewhere else. I'm just giving it a warning because he hasn't seen this presentation, okay? First of all, parties. People and organizations need IDs. Rights holders, whoever they are, whether they're individual photographers or whether they're Getty images, need an ID if you're going to automate rights management. I don't want to know it's John Smith. I want an identity that my computer can ultimately get a route to. And the problem with party IDs is inevitably the same parties will be identified by different identities in the same place, and you can't stop that. With identifiers, the key is to try and identify as close to the source as you can. So when we come onto images, we would all know if you can capture the identity at the time you take the picture, which technically is possible, that would be a great solution. With people, that means putting a chip in at birth. We're probably not quite ready for that. Even American Homeland Security possibly isn't quite ready for that. But we're not going to do that. People are going to issue party identities all the time, and they're going to use them in different sectors, in different systems, and so on. So we have to recognize that. Now, there's a standard called the ISNI, which was standardized 5 years ago, the International Standard Name Identifier, which is becoming established as a cross-media identifier for parties, starting in the text, bibliographic, music sectors. And it works in a different way from things like ISBN. It's a hub identifier. Here's a real example from the ISNI database. Paul Simon, who happens to be one of my favorite writers, so I can indulge my knowledge of him. He has an ISNI, which is that number. There are currently 10 of the sources linked to the ISNI who have identified the same Paul Simon in their own systems. So, Bibliothèque Nationale of France, the CiF Music Societies, the Library of Congress Classification Code, another French identity. There are another 6, I think. These are real. There's a real example I just took from the ISNI system. And what they're doing is saying we're mapping our identity into the ISNI so that if I pick up any of these identifiers, I can translate to any of the others. So it works like a hub. And in fact, although this is the standard, nobody may ever use this. It doesn't have to be used. If you're using that one, and you're the Bibliothèque Nationale, you can translate from one to the other. And so it's based on the fact that you issue an identifier, and this is where the Q-in is an analogy. The CIF issues a Q-in, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to use that. Now you might, and I think actually ISNI will probably be very widely used. But importantly, you are not forced to do it. And so the Bibliothèque Nationale does not have to throw its identifiers in. And that's critical, because a lot of you have a lot of things invested already in systems and IDs, and you don't want to have to change them. You're not going to. And so a system which allows you to carry on using yours, map to something else, and then have automated ways of doing translations, looks like a very attractive way forward. And that's why this standard has been based on that hub model. There are, by the way, 14 other Paul Simons in the ISNI database now. By the time you get photographers in, which is where I hope we go to, there'll probably be 140 of them, I expect. But the point of this is disambiguating, so we get an identity, not just a name. So, the suggestion here is the existing party IDs can be standardized by this method. Plus is building a registry and issuing its own plus IDs for parties, which can become very important, I hope, in this sector. There are other proprietary and standard IDs which exist for parties, which some of you use. These can be standardized simply by a mapping to ISNI. And through And just a note on that, of course, Paul Simon probably takes photographs. Creative people these days tend to do a lot of different things. The same people crop up, and the same organizations crop up, here, there, and everywhere. So having one identity mapped for all your different roles is very helpful. So through R.D.I, we want to explore with ISNI, with PLUS, with CIF, and with any others, how we can move forward on party identification. Finally then, let me put up a straw man for a picture code, and to follow the ISO pattern here, I've said, let's pretend it's the International Standard Picture Code, ISPC, okay? Could be called anything. I put it in inverted commas. Please don't take this as any sort of proposal. This is just out of my head, okay? So, for the sake of drawing a picture. The suggestion here is we can combine features of 4 different standards to come up with a way of making this work, which is going to be as painless as possible. The first is this. The ISBN and ISRC and others, they work on a system where you issue a prefix to a particular person, a publisher, a creator, whoever it might be. So it might be a library, it might be a photographer. And they can then assign their own identifiers to that prefix. The standard process. ISBN go further, they give you a structured form and you then have to register it with someone. We're not saying that, we're just saying hand out a prefix. So Sylvie is a photographer, let's just say, or running a library, and so she can get a prefix and register that prefix as belonging to her. She's then free to issue any numbers that any identifiers she wants to her own images. And from another standard, the DOI, we can steal another approach, which is we don't have a structure for these identifiers. We simply use the URI format, which means once you've got the prefix, you can put anything you like behind it. So if Sylvie's already got her own identification systems internally, just by putting the prefix in front of them, she can make them globally unique and make them a standard ID without having to change her own identifiers. The DOI, the Digital Object Identifier, uses this approach, and very, very successfully. So all DOIs look different, but they all have the same things at the front, which make sure you know they're a DOI. Okay? So you can reuse your existing IDs if you have them. The third thing that we do, and this is where queuing comes in, we take the ISNI hub approach, and we then say Sylvie has got her identifier. The same image may have been identified by Abby, and she's issued her own identifier for it. That's not a huge problem, except we can't join them up. And so what CiF can do, or services like CiF, again, all of this in principle is open to different services, but we've got CiF, so let's work with CiF, can link Abby's and Sylvie's numbers together because through the content recognition it's identified they're the same, issued the queuing, and that queuing then plays the same role as the ISNI does for parties. It provides the link between these other numbers. And it may be a standard that people use, or it may simply enable people to link other standards. You see where I'm going on this. So it gives us the freedom to let people do what they're doing now as simply as possible, but make it standard, and it also enables us to fill in the gaps as much as we want, as much as we have to do, okay? And the final thing is, we would not enforce a registry for this. We don't enforce people. It's impractical with the sheer volume of what's going on here. But IPTC metadata gives already a basic standard of descriptive stuff, which can go hand in hand. So come up with this ISPC, International Standard Code, embed it with the metadata in your image, and that code then can provide the key for building all sorts of other things on it. It can make ideal use of what CiF is doing, and it can make best use of existing standards without doing things that it doesn't want to. Okay, so there's my straw man. Benefits of it: it's scalable, uses proven methods, minimum changes for established systems. CiF and Plus may provide hubs, or provide services such as hubs for linking, whether it's for parties or for images. Smaller businesses and individual photographers can use services like Plus to get their IDs, or like CiF to get their IDs. Standards can be built into cameras. But you've got a standard that you can take to the manufacturers and say, look, if you just use this and allow it now to be configurable, which is going to be, then the photographer can actually do everything they need right at the outset. And your industry is better placed than any other industry to do that because of the way your technology and your images work. Music could never do that. You write a song, it takes 6 months these days to get it produced and recorded. And all this can roll out at its own pace. It doesn't require a big bang, lots of changes, or a big upfront investment. Okay? So there's my straw man for us to consider. My final slide. These are the main building blocks, but they're only the main building blocks of standardized data. More is needed in terms of messages and vocabularies. The work that Jeff has done with Plus is a great building block for that. So is IPTC metadata. All this stuff takes time. Initiatives like these give it momentum. And so getting these initiatives together to push it forward is good. But we need to keep it moving and to make it interoperable across sectors. And here's my plea. Don't make standards a political football. I've seen this too often in my life in the standards world, that's why I make this. Public identifiers are enablers of business. They are not controllers. The person who issues the identifier does not control anything about it as long as that identifier is available to everybody. So don't worry who issued it. Worry about whether everyone can get at it. Because if they can, look at history and look at how it's worked in other industries, it works fine if you let it go forward. So take the long view, don't let politics get in the way. Without standards, organizations whose business is managing data can control your business in ways that you don't want, and I don't need to name the organization that immediately springs to mind for that. You've seen that, and so this is tools that enable you to move forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Godfrey. We're not doing too badly. I mean, if everyone's sort of still sitting up and sort of vaguely conscious in this slightly warm room, we thought we'd have a Q&A session. So if I could invite Abby and Jeff and Sylvie, for whom we don't have a name card, but you know her anyway. Take me down. And Godfrey and Alfonso and Sergi. Yeah, I think we're just about all right. Just while you get your breath back, you need to shut a little bit along. It's just asked Jeff, that's now on, by the way. We've talked about Plus in a number of different contexts. As a member of LCC, a member of R.D.I, standards provider, the background to the capture system. So Jeff has the unenviable task of acting as a warm-up act to the Q&A session, just to say a few words about where he's at with Plus at the moment, and to inspire you to yet more questions. So Jeff, over to you.
Thank you. So this is an R.D.I and CiF session, so I'm not providing a presentation with a demonstration of the Plus registry, but I am happy to provide any of you with a demonstration on request. Many of you have seen introductions to what Plus is. I'll give you the 1 minute on what Plus is. So back in 2004, the book publishers, magazine publishers, newspaper publishers, the picture libraries, the photographers, the illustrators, museums, and libraries came together to begin to solve the rights data problem that we've been talking about for this whole session. And that's what Plus is. It's an industry-neutral coalition that's not controlled by the picture industry. It is primarily, the board of directors, for example, has 1 seat for every industry sector, and there's 1 seat for all the picture libraries of the world and 1 seat for all the creators of the world. The balance of the seats are held by nonprofit organizations representing your clients, the publishers, the ad agencies, also the museums and libraries, etc. And the feeling was that, as was mentioned earlier, if we don't move together to create a neutral, nonprofit way of storing the connection between images and rights information and rights holders, that a commercial solution would step forward, perhaps by one of the big search engines, etc. That could get, any successful solution would be purchased by a bigger company, and we would lose control entirely of that connection. There's no feeling that there can't be solutions that are commercial in nature for, of course, licensing images, finding images, etc., but controlling that connection and providing the information as to the connection between images, rights holders, and rights information is being done by this neutral, nonprofit, and global initiative. And so currently, to give you status, we've got 134 countries worth of members involved in Plus now. Initially, we set about creating standards for machine-readable rights, and as Abby mentioned, this can be done for very complex licenses or the most simple licenses. It doesn't matter whether people are paying for a license or not. You can pay with a banana. It doesn't matter to Plus. We're not involved in any kind of valuation of images, and we don't tell people how to license. All we say is that if you're going to license, you should do so in such a way as can be represented by a machine-readable code, so that the rights information can be interpreted by machines, and that so machines can act upon that rights information. Also, very importantly, especially here in Europe, where most of our Plus registrants do business, is the ability to read a license in any language, not just English, so that somebody who is looking at rights information for an image they find on the web in Japan can read the rights in Japanese, even if the rights were issued by a company in France, that sort of thing. And so what we first built were standards for machine-readable rights. And then with that, the first version of that done, we proceeded to create what you can think of as a global hub for rights information. Not with the idea that this would be the only registry in the world, but with the idea that we could help and support efforts such as the CIF by linking them to registries and other hubs all over the world. If you think of this as many registries, each connected to hubs, and then connecting all those hubs together, that's what PLUS does, is connects all the hubs together. So we're working with the UK Copyright Hub, for example. We are, the PLUS standards have been adopted by the IPTC, so you'll see them in the IPTC standards, including a place to put identifiers, whether those are PLUS identifiers or CIF identifiers, etc. Currently, we've completed our beta testing of the registration of people and companies, and we're moving on to registration of images and search for images by ID and by image recognition. We will never include search for images by keywords. We don't mean to compete with the picture industry's existing or future solutions for finding images by searching by text. It's either a search by ID or a search by the image itself. As we're in beta right now, we are seeking organizations, picture libraries, museums, libraries, who can contribute more than 50,000 images at a time for image registration and search testing purposes to contact us so that we can build a sufficient pool of images for testing of our registry. And I would welcome any of you to contact me at info@useplus.org. That's info@useplus.org to participate in a pilot project with publishers and ad agencies, design firms, etc. As I'm not making a PLUS presentation today, I'm going to shut that down now and just answer questions.
Thanks, Jeff. That's great. That was a real sort of. I was going to say. How much did I think of it? Googly, I threw you there, but I'm not certain that cricket expressions necessarily convey very well outside the UK. I attended my very first photography lesson only a matter of 6 months ago or so, and the woman who was taking it told me that it was her ambition that no one was going to leave the room ever taking a picture with the setting set on A ever again. So my ambition for this session is that no one goes out of this room thinking to themselves, God, that was strange. Or at least if you think, God, that was strange, that you at least ask the question about why you think it was strange, so that you at least have your questions answered before you leave. With that injunction to you, we would very much welcome any questions that you have about R.D.I, CiF, PLUS, or any of the other topics that we've talked about today. Over to you. The floor is yours. Please, someone say something.
Hi, John. Just talk further. It's a bit more, further thinking. I was just going to ask if anyone had thought about the neighbouring rights in photography and how to manage those. Model releases, property releases. I mean, these are things that are coming up all the time. For us. I mean, I would love to know how to track down, Brad Pitt's, agent to ask if they can use it. A company is using that on a billboard or something, because at the moment we're just sort of passing it on, saying you have to clear the secondary rights. If this was an extra service that we could offer just by identifying rights holders and contacting them, that would be a great benefit for us.
I was getting ahead of myself.
Okay, on this I can answer that I think that things have to be done one step at a time. So I liked Godfrey's presentation very much because he showed these evolutions of all IDs with the pictures industry, almost the only industry with no ID, and we have to start somewhere. So of course in the pictures you have many rights, but at the moment there is, maybe we can go back a couple of slides, if it's possible.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, here on this slide, look, we have this at the moment for the picture industry, this ISNI. It's handled by collecting societies. They only have parties identifier and they can't find the authors of the picture. But if you have a special picture without the author, it wasn't possible. This is something that we found out. Sorry. This is something that we found out in the FARROW project.
Separate from the author.
Separate, okay, it's better. So it's something that we found out in the FARROW project. We had this, that can be managed by collecting societies, but on the part of the picture agencies, there was just nothing. A lot of IDs all over the place, every agency had their IDs, if you ask them, they were telling you, we manage that all right, we know where to track them, but actually, it wouldn't work outside the industry. So at the moment, we're just trying to do this part, the CIF, of course, and this is already very difficult. So, but I can, from a conceptual point of view, if I followed Godfrey's presentation well, I think probably it's possibly possible to have IDs for all kind of stuff, isn't it?
Oh, sure. Let me answer enough aspects, Jeff. Yes, actually, I know that there's an agency in Jersey, of all places, which is a tax haven among other things, but who are setting up an image rights registry for precisely this purpose, to look for people clearing image rights. But the principle, as far as R.D.I is concerned and LCC is concerned, it's designed to handle any kind of rights. So in terms of, is this a framework that you could express the rights in image rights or the model rights and something? Yes, absolutely. The model is designed to enable that. And I think that ISNI, because you start with the identifier, if you can't identify John Smith, how do you have any way of expressing it? I think the ISNI route is where to start, because you need to get the individuals in some way identified before you can hang rights information on it. Now, there are other ways around that, but in terms of an orderly way forward, I think that the development of ISNI will provide an infrastructure where it will become very obvious to people that Paul Simon and everybody else there, ISNI is already becoming more of a database about information, for example, about their creations. I only learned recently, because of the way they built it in the first period, it's become the authoritative source for libraries to discover whether they've accredited a wrong author for a book, because all the major libraries are providing this data about the books that John Smith wrote. And the ISNI is able to say, hold on, these 3 people think that's wrong. And so they're now becoming an authoritative database about that information. And the critical part of it is they've realized that they have to allow the people themselves, where they're still alive, or their agencies, to have the control over the data that's in the ISNI database. Now I can see that becoming the point at which you say, fine, at this point I will make sure that my identifiers and my personal data is correct, and I'll also provide the links to my agent and my rights and so on. So I think ISNI could become, over time, the hub for useful information about people connected with rights. That's just a speculation, but it seems to me a sensible way to go.
As I understood the question, it was, you find an image that's got a person in it, you need to clear the rights for that person.
Or an artwork.
Or artwork.
All the things that
right.
artworks, and who's the secondary rights. Yeah, the secondary rights.
Right, secondary rights. So this is a topic that's being handled on the IPTC Photo Metadata Working Group. PLUS is participating in that. At PLUS, our licensed data format already includes the fields for identifying the models within an image, including how the rights are limited for the usage of each model. The current task before the IPTC Photo Metadata Working Group is to be able to separately identify where those models are, or if there's multiple artworks, for example, in an image, where they are, the zones within an image, and then apply metadata to each of those areas. But to answer your question, there already is a standardized field for that. It's the PLUS, you'll see a property rights field and also a model rights field that's been incorporated into IPTC extension, where licensors can incorporate that information into images or into a database that then can be looked up to see what rights are associated with the file. And from there you can get onto the people from whom you need to clear the rights.
How's the track through getting to the end? Like, so you might have a name of the artist, but to understand who manages those rights, how can you then track that so that you can direct or the client itself can actually go from the image and to the secondary rights holder without going through lots of other sources?
Okay, so what PLUS provides is also a document ID. That, the photograph A photograph can involve multiple agreements, as you know, the license agreement, but then agreements between various parties that are pictured in the image, or the owners of various property that are pictured in the image. And so there's layers of these agreements, and plus document ID allows to identify a document that has the contact information for the parties that are responsible for the picture or property that appear in the image. And that's been in place for quite some time. It's just up to people to use it now that it's been adopted globally by the IPTC. I can get into it more deeply afterward if you want details.
Alfonso wants to say something, and then I know Jean wants to say something at the back. Do you read it, Jean, speak? Yep, Jean.
My understanding is the R.D.I. project is currently funded through an EU award, and that it is a demonstration project. So I guess my question is, what happens as the funds from the award are expended? How or what needs to happen to ensure that the project persists and that the work goes on?
Strictly speaking, R.D.I. is part funded by the EC. It's only 50% funded. The rest of it is funded by the participants. I'll put a slide up in a minute showing you the totality of all the people involved. But you're right, and quite reasonably, one of the requirements on us from the EC as a result of receiving public funding is that actually we need to show long-term business plans. Those business plans will not be for the R.D.I. consortium as it stands at the moment. So those business plans will be for the technology that is developed as part of the consortium. And we have, over the course of the just over 2.5 years of the project, an objective to develop those business plans. So conversations with people like the Copyright Hub form part of the early stages of how we can see that being developed. Equally, I know that some of the participants in the project are using the funding to look at possible future applications for their own products, so they're using it to part fund the development of products that they already have, or using it to develop systems which they can see are useful outside the sort of model that we've been talking about here, but simply because they represent a very flexible database. So there are a number of ideas floating around, and they will come to fruition, but R.D.I. as a consortium will not exist. Well, I forget what 27 months is after October 2013, but it will cease.
So the R.D.I. is strictly a demonstration project?
Absolutely, yeah. There never was any intention for R.D.I. to be a product or a thing. The vast majority, in fact, of the members, it's an interesting structure from an EC project perspective. The vast majority of the members are actually providing data. So from their perspective, they're receiving virtually no money. Their role is simply to provide us with the sample data so that we actually have the raw material to work with. The bulk of the funding goes to a very small number of people who are actually undertaking systems development, and they're the ones who have to justify the long-term investment. Any other questions?
Yeah, Doug Hill at RightsPro. One of the problems with some of the other registries like ISBN is, as an individual photographer, for example, you cannot go to ISBN and get your own book ID without having some publisher status being created in the process of doing that. So it limits, it's one of the issues of any of these kinds of models, it limits the free market, really, which we seem to have a variety of approaches going around. But I'm not saying that we would want to eliminate, aggregators, because they have their purpose, and there are photographers who would want to use aggregators. But what about individual photographers being able to go themselves to be able to create their own IDs and be able to have an organization that they know they're not going to have to pay, $10,000 in order to be able to get into.
Jeff, do you want to say anything? Yes, to your right, Jeff.
First of all, Doug and I are talking to each other here, but he's the developer for the Plus Registry at RightsPro, so I just want to disclose that. There's no bias in the question, but you know, our view is that the IDs, the system needs to be provided on a cost recovery basis, and so we need to make the IDs available for the most minimal amount, if not free. The system needs to be self-funding in the long term, and within the R.D.I. project, Plus is not receiving any compensation, but outside the R.D.I. project, you know, the Plus registry is funded by contributions to date, and then afterward it's just self-funding by contributions from its users in very small amounts, and as the economies of scale are achieved, the pricing goes down and it becomes almost free. Our goal is to get it to as free as possible.
I wish to go back to John's initial question that started talking about model releases and property releases, and then just went to other things. And I wish to talk a little bit, well, a few words to say that the practicalities of all these model releases, because it's nice to see that talking about identifiers, how this is going to be identified, etc., etc. But I wish to say that in the sense of model releases and property releases, considering that I am the manager of 3 companies in 3 different countries, and how much I suffer regarding the validity of all the model releases, and suffer the court cases that we have at least 2 or 3 a year, okay? Based on the fact that everybody has model releases in theory, but in practice they don't have any model releases at all. So you face problems in this. So it's great to talk about standardizing everything, but I think we have to, it has to penetrate in our biology, okay? That when you say, I have a model release, the model release is valid and it's going to stand in front of a court when a court case arrives. Because this is the practicality of every day, that this is not the reality. So maybe CEPIC has a lot of work to do in order to generate the standards, like the standard model release, that is not valid to say, you know, no, the model release is in the hands of the photographers, because photographers sometimes are disorganized people, not all of them. Disorganized people cannot find a model release, you know, when they shot a picture in 2003, and somebody's complaining, but they get this published, this image has been published, and something we entities believing that there is a model release, when in fact there is not, okay? And this, I'm not talking about in theoretical issues, I'm talking about things that I suffer every year, okay? So it's good about, I'm talking about identifiers, etc., but the bottom line, you know, of the industry has to understand that certain things have to be considered really seriously. So generating standards for model releases and making the agencies understand that if you sell pictures from that contains people, you have to have the model releases of that. And I will talk also about museums, you know. We receive a number of letters, you know, every year from museums asking us why you have this image in your collection, why are you using this image? How did you take this image from my museum? Because especially in America, they consider that a picture that is hanging on the wall, the copyright belongs to the museum, which is not, okay? Belongs to the artist, and some of the artists are public domain. But the images are hanging in a Chicago museum or Washington gallery, okay? They own the rights to sell to that image, and you are not allowed to sell that image for any commercial use, while it's a painting in a public domain. So I think that all this in theory is very good, but there are the underlying factors, okay, that affects the daily life of the business, okay? I don't know if there is any questions on this matter, okay? As I know it's not exactly this, but I have to be clarified.
And to be fair to everyone, we probably only have about time for one more question before we should really put it to a close.
Okay, and adding to Alfonso's concerns are privacy laws across Europe. So you can't just go putting private information into a file that's then distributed and it has information about the people in the image. This is yet another reason why this industry has to move collectively to putting an ID in the image and storing the information separately so that you can control the permissions of who accesses that information and so that you can update that information when it changes.
How are we doing? Any more questions?
I just wanted to ask CEPIC really what practical steps they are going to take to promote the CIF to the, especially to the agencies community. Because speaking from a British point of view, this project is not very well known in the United Kingdom. I'm personally a supporter of it, but there's probably, obviously, and it's nice to say that the technical side of it is very well developed, but in terms of the public support, especially amongst the agencies, there's quite a lot of work needed.
Giancarlo, you know that I demo the CIF in your office in England, okay?
But not many people in England know about the CIF.
No, I know. I did a rally in October last year visiting some agencies and a couple of collections from museums showing this, okay? But allow me to say that we have to wake up from the General Assembly that we had 2 days ago, okay? Because we have been living with the CIF problem like a hot potato in the hands of the CEPIC, because we didn't know if we were allowed to continue with the project or not, okay? Because it was some opposition from some NAs, okay? I think it was a heavy, we touched the whole thing in a heavy way, deep way in the General Assembly, and I was to say that everything we got is we got 7 votes in favor, 1 I would consider an empty vote, okay? So we are now entitled to continue developing the project, putting this project as it is now hanging from the website of AG, from CIFIC, okay? In order for people to register, okay, and get access and try the thing. It is clear that I don't know if the people will have funds to continue doing things, but in my perception is I will do as much as I can to now publicly say things to national associations and to affiliates, saying this is possible. Probably you're going to receive a letter from me soon saying, you know, I can upload your images to the CIF, but from that point on, you have to administer, you know, so I can upload your images because I have them, okay? But you have to deal directly with the CIF, not through my company, okay? So there are a number of issues that they have to be quickly be resolved. Because until now, we have been acting in a limbo, okay? That we were not sure if we were going to have be accused of generating liabilities specific. So I'm saying that today's allowed me to, all of us, to wake up, okay? And I'll continue doing the job.
Also, what I wanted to say here is that we're not alone. I mean, CEPIC is not alone, so of course there's some PR, some information to be given to the members. As Alfonso said, we took the first years, first we informed the National Association, was 1 year of work, and you need to inform the affiliates, etc. So that's within the organization. But otherwise, we're not alone. I mean, we had also demonstration in the Copyright Hub in the UK. You know, I think it's really well known, the Copyright Hub in the UK. I don't think we need to do any work there. They're doing the work for us. And also, we are being asked by FARROW for people who work with libraries. They probably know this system. It's a tool which has been developed for national libraries to be able to clear the rights of the works they want to have digitized. For example, in the project Europeana, which there was a demonstration just 2 days ago. So I mean, you know, it's just not CEPIC alone. It's CEPIC being part of projects who have more means than we do and can do this kind of PR work.
Thanks, Sylvie. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're time expired, and I'm anxious to let you get out of this room. On the board, you see a summary of all the people who are participating in the project. Some of them are actually consortium members, some of them are just participating by providing data. They're receiving no funds whatsoever, but they just find it an interesting project to be involved in so that they can actually begin to get some insight into how business models are going to evolve. So it only remains for me to thank Sylvie, Jeff, Abby, Alfonso, Godfrey and Sergi, to thank all of you for your time. I hope that you leave slightly better informed than you came in, and we hope to speak to you again very soon. Thank you very much.